Hi, my name is Kel and I'm a therapist and educator with a special interest in eating disorders. Come on in, take a seat, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for bite-sized content across the mental health and eating disorder spectrum. In today's video, I'd like to talk to you about eating disorder recovery. And in particular, I'd like to think about the question, is recovery from an eating disorder possible? This is a question that I get asked often by both individuals affected by eating disorders and by those supporting them, including fellow professionals. I suppose when people ask me this question, what they're really wondering is there hope? Is there hope that I might recover from my eating disorder? Is there hope that this person I'm supporting will recover from their eating disorder? As you might imagine, there has been quite a lot of research into eating disorder recovery, and I'm going to quote the research that Beat the UK Eating Disorder Charity use, which suggests that a little under half of those affected by an eating disorder will achieve a full recovery. A further third will go on to achieve a partial recovery, with that small minority maintaining a chronic illness across their lifespan. At first glance, this might sound a little bit discouraging to say a little under half achieve a full recovery. However, collectively, what these statistics are suggesting is that the vast majority of people with eating disorders will see significant improvement or recover from their eating disorder. However, what we're also seeing here is that perhaps it's a little more complicated than the initial question might sound, and this seems to typically be the case when it comes to eating disorders. We're introducing questions already about what is full recovery, what is partial recovery, and what we tend to find is that different professionals think that different things constitute recovery. They define recovery differently. There is no standard definition of what constitutes recovery from an eating disorder. So a medical professional, for example, might focus on an individual's physical health and the behavioural signs of their eating disorder. So let's take somebody that's binging as an example here. A medical professional would consider somebody to be in partial recovery when their frequency of binging behaviours had significantly reduced, and they might consider this person to be recovered when they're no longer engaging in binging behaviours. If we think about instead somebody with anorexia nervosa, a medical professional might focus on the weight of the client or patient and be looking for recovery to indicate that the person's weight has returned to their healthy normal, and that in addition to that, they're no longer restricting their food intake. However, as a talking therapist, I kind of consider that this isn't holistic enough. And this is certainly something that I've heard echoed from clients over the years. In fact, I've spoken to many people who have arguably, under a medical definition, experienced recovery, or at least partial recovery, and who yet themselves don't feel that they are emotionally or psychologically speaking in recovery. I think this is really important because, as I've said in previous videos and previous blog posts, eating disorders are mental health conditions. And therefore the mental health components need to be a significant part of defining what recovery is. I might define recovery more based on things that are more difficult to measure. For example, is the person's self-esteem improved? Are they able to engage socially with their family and friends? Are they less preoccupied with body weight, shape, size, or food? An individual affected by an eating disorder might agree with a medical definition of an eating disorder recovery, might agree with my definition of eating disorder recovery, or might have an entirely different personal view of what would constitute recovery. And in fact, I think this is why we need to talk about it. We don't spend enough time determining with our clients what it is to have an eating disorder and what it might mean to recover from an eating disorder. So I do try to take this time. I try to, in the earlier sessions with clients, think about how we would know if full recovery had been achieved and what the steps towards recovery on that pathway might look like. That way we can check in regularly and see, are we moving down this recovery pathway? Have we achieved recovery from your eating disorder yet? What that determination of recovery looks like actually is pretty different from client to client, as to are the steps that might get us there. And this is absolutely fine. In fact, it's more than fine if we can determine what the client sees as their steps towards recovery. Not only are we developing knowledge on how to measure this person's experience of recovery, but also we're starting to hone down how we might help them to make steps towards it. So for example, if a client tells me that an important part of partial recovery for them would be that they normalize their eating patterns, we might discuss whether or not it's appropriate for them to see a dietitian, because I can't offer them a meal plan as a talking therapist. And if I hadn't taken the time to sit and determine what that recovery pathway was, I might have missed that opportunity to direct them to a professional that could really help them. Sometimes we can get a little bit caught up in what recovery looks like from our own perspective, and in directing somebody down that pathway that we do miss important factors. And so this is, in a roundabout way, taking a step back and thinking about the picture of recovery in terms of maybe the practicalities such as a meal plan, and also in terms of what topics we might wish to discuss in the confines of therapy. There is no right way to recover, and there is no right way to determine whether or not recovery has happened. When we create these steps towards recovery, we also achieve something else as well. We take away some of the overwhelm of the notion of recovery. For a person in the middle of their eating disorder, or even in very early stages of recovery, to be looking at this potential point in the distant future of full recovery can feel too much, can feel unachievable. And so if we mindlessly encourage them in that direction, we might actually be setting them up to fail, instead of taking a step back and thinking about what the points along the journey might be that we can be a bit more proactive about. A client that feels terrified and overwhelmed about the notion of full recovery, and maybe even isn't on board for making some changes yet, can still make small steps on this journey if we've defined them in this way. And frankly, when I'm working with clients, I'm not working based on my own frame of reference. I am working based on their frame of reference. So it doesn't make sense for me to be determining what eating disorder recovery is and whether or not it's yet been achieved. This is also about empowering clients and letting them know that they can have a leading role in their recovery from their eating disorder. On this journey to recovery, many people experience blips and relapses. So in my own words, a blip is the returning of an eating disorder behaviour or thought for a moment in time, maybe a few hours or even a day. And a relapse would be the return of an eating disorder thought or behaviour for an extended period of time, for days or weeks. When talking about what eating disorder recovery is, I find that it's really helpful to talk to clients about the fact that this is a normal part of the process, that most people on the journey to recovery do have relapses, do experience blips. If we don't directly have those conversations, even though we as the professional might understand that that's a normal part of the experience, we might actually be leaving the clients feeling really discouraged that they have fallen back down and into a behaviour, when in fact falling back down and into a behaviour can be framed as a learning opportunity, a chance to make sense of why this struggle happened at this moment in time and how we can work towards recovery in a better, more meaningful, more helpful way for this individual. Another interesting conversation to have with clients, and indeed something that's interesting for you to think about, is what really is normal? Because I suppose we might use language like, I want to be able to eat normally in eating disorder recovery, or I want to be able to take part in life normally. But when it comes to our experience of the way we perceive our bodies and the way we feel about our bodies, and in terms of diet culture and how we look at food, arguably most of us have a pretty disordered attitude towards this. And with this in mind, when I'm working with clients, we're quite often almost working towards 110% recovered. We're working to get them to a point that is healthier and happier and freer of these eating disorder type thoughts than they were even before the actual onset of their eating disorder. And to be really frank and honest about this, I do believe is necessary, because clients can often feel that they aren't achieving recovery because they still occasionally have some critical thoughts about their body or some anxious thoughts about the way that they're eating, when in fact it seems that that is pretty normal. And of course, I'd love to encourage all of my clients to work towards 110% recovery if that's what they want. But I think it is important for it to be clear that that is the case, that we're working towards something that is even beyond that normal. And I want to let you know that this is achievable. In fact, if it wasn't achievable, my job would be pretty miserable. But I get to join people on their journey towards eating disorder recovery almost every day, and I get to experience people moving along their recovery journey and into recovery on a regular basis. This doesn't mean that everybody that I work with achieves full recovery. And in fact, sometimes people don't even wish to choose to work towards that full recovery. In some instances, clients choose to end therapy and in that respect stop working on their eating disorder recovery journey once they've got to a point where they feel free enough, and they might return to therapy in the future, or they might continue to work on recovery alone or with their immediate support network, and that's okay too. Clients get to determine what their recovery journey is and how far they push towards that potential 110% recovery point. I hope that from hearing me talk about recovery, what you're hearing is something positive, that it's absolutely achievable, and that perhaps even though statistics aren't strictly reliable, because it's difficult for us to determine what we are talking about when talking about eating disorder recovery. If you've found this interesting, or if you've learned something from today's video, I'd love to get some support from you in the form of liking this video. And as always, I'd love to hear questions that you've got about eating disorders or mental health in the comments below. Until next time, be kind, be curious, be yourself.